Welcome to Pulse of the City, the new civil rights movement. Our title today is "The Way to Complain is to Effect Change," with the scripture of Romans 12, 1 and 2. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is a reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your minds. As we understand that all leaders are ministers, and we all have a duty to effect change and leave the world's situations better than how we found them. Every leader has to effect change. I'm here today as your host, Pastor Frederick Lamar, along
Reverend Joel L. King Jr., co-host, and our guest today is with us right now. And when you introduce yourself and who you are, tell us who you are.
Sure, I'm Deputy Chief Ken Keeler of the Columbus Division of Police. I oversee the division's Patrol South Subdivision, which is about the southern half of the city of Columbus patrol operations, and also represent the division as the chairperson of the Firearms Death Review Board, where we review police-involved shootings and police-involved in-custody deaths.
Tell us a little bit about the working of the department.
So the department is divided into two patrol subdivisions, north and south, where our patrol officers are overseen by deputy chiefs. Certainly when it comes to police-involved shootings, we have what we call our critical incident response team, which is a team of specially trained homicide investigators who will respond to any police-involved shooting situation to prepare that investigation.
Now, Chief, given the situation that's happened in Ferguson, and truly it can happen anywhere, even here, what are some of the things that we could share with the public or that we can share that help it not to happen here?
Sure. Well, one of the things, and I can't speak to the specifics in Ferguson because we weren't there and we don't know exactly what happened. But that's one of the key pieces to remind everybody is that until the investigation is completed, we really don't know what the facts are. There's oftentimes rumors get passed around and such. One of the things that's important to recognize what happened, I think, in Ferguson was a general misunderstanding of the process, or maybe they weren't even clear on what the process would be when investigating a shooting like that. One of the differences with the city of Columbus is that we've done this a number of times. We've been involved in these types of situations, and we have a long-established process as to how we will investigate a police-involved shooting. And that starts with that critical incident response team that responds to the scene that night.
Okay, so you're saying, okay, shooting takes place, okay, crowd is around, police come, explain to us the process.
So one of the first things that's going to happen is we're going to push that crowd back a little bit so we have some space to work in and make sure we have an opportunity to collect all the evidence, right? And that's where the yellow tape is involved, and we ask people to stay outside that tape, of course. Then who will respond are a team of at least 6 of our most highly trained homicide investigators. Any police-involved shooting is investigated as a criminal act, okay? Just like any self-defense type shooting would be investigated. So if a convenience store clerk shoots somebody who tries to rob him or her, then that's going to be investigated as a criminal act until it's proven otherwise. A claim of self-defense is made. So the homicide investigators will come in and prepare an investigation into that shooting, into that homicide, just as they would any other shooting. At the conclusion of their investigation, within roughly 60 to 90 days, they will take that investigation and deliver it to the county prosecutor for presentation to the grand jury. And so one of the things we saw in Missouri was a call for grand jury right away, a call for a presentation and an indictment right away. The truth is that will take some time, and that investigation has to be completed before we can move on to the grand jury.
Chief, can we move something about the Ohio law about concealed weapons? So to explain that to the community as to what it means in Ohio, different than it is in Missouri or other states.
So Ohio has a fairly liberal concealed carry policy, which allows you to get a concealed carry permit in the state of Ohio. There are certain locations like schools and government buildings where it's prohibited to carry a firearm into those buildings in a concealed manner. And then individual businesses or property owners can also prohibit you from bringing a weapon into there by clearly marking on their windows that firearms are not permitted. Absent that prohibition, somebody with a CCW, a concealed carry permit is allowed to walk into those businesses or move about society with that weapon concealed.
And that's a key point, to walk into the building if they don't allow it. But in the incident, I know we can't talk about this, it's outside our city at this point, but the incident happened in Beaver Creek was the fact that the gun was possibly pointed down upwards. So the law says, as long as it's pointed down, he was legal. I mean, not to talk about that case, but
right. Well, certainly when a police officer begins to approach, even if you're legally allowed to carry that, certainly we would ask you to make no threatening movements, no fast movements, and no movements that would suggest that that firearm is about to be used or utilized. Carried is not a problem. Utilized would cause certainly a concern by the police.
Chief, we thank you. Thank you for coming on. There's many things that the department is doing along with the churches, like Bridging the Gap and all those things that we really don't got time to get into, but we will get into it at another time. So thank you. Stay right there. We'll be right back with another version of Pulse of the City.
Welcome back to Pulse of the City. I'm Reverend Joel L. King Jr. along with my co-host, Pastor Fred DeMar. And today we have a premier leader of the Women's Ecumenical Organization in our city. Will you introduce yourself to us?
My name is Frida Gilliard, and I am the president of the Baptist Ministers' Wives and Ministers' Widows Association of Columbus, Ohio.
And what does that organization entails of?
We are a body of women that are married to pastors and to associate ministers, and our hallmark of our existence is service. And so we are here to serve the community in which we live and in which our churches are a part of.
What church are you a part of?
I'm a part of Shiloh Baptist Church, which is a historical church in the community. We are 146 years old, and my husband is Dr. Otha Gilliard, and who also happens to be the president of the Ohio Baptist General Convention, which is a state convention.
How long, and you just your first term as leader of that organization?
This is my second year, and I'm counting. There's a lot of work to do, and it seems like the time goes by very fast. But we are 75 years old this November, and we are right now busy with our 75th anniversary celebration, which also coincides with, excuse me, with our Minnie B. Cleveland annual scholarship and awards luncheon.
What are some of the things, President Gilliard, that the ministers' wives do, you know, in the church or in the community? Because so often we don't hear it, we don't see it highlighted. So, what are some of the things that y'all do in the community?
In most of our churches, I feel comfortable saying that we work primarily with the women of the church, and especially with our younger women, because we know that it looks a lot different now for our young women than it did when we were younger women. So we really try to help them with a lot of the issues that they are faced with each and every day in their school life, and even our college students.
So explain, I mean, kind of elaborate. You said it looks a whole lot different now than what it did when we was coming up.
Well, yeah.
I know we about the same age, but could you just explain,
Well,
you know, some of the challenges?
Yeah, I can remember growing up as a teenager, and the big issue then was girls getting pregnant.
Okay.
We still have young women getting pregnant, but the issues are much larger now. You're dealing with HIV, AIDS, you're dealing with all kind of sexually transmitted diseases that, you know, things that we never heard of. And also now the young women are faced with infant mortality. So many of our young women don't reveal that they are actually pregnant, and then by the time they do, they've had no prenatal care, which also puts them in a higher risk category for infant mortality. So there are just a multitude of issues that that we were not dealing with as young women, and domestic violence is a huge issue, especially in our high schools. We now have 1 in 5 high school students that is a victim of domestic violence.
So how does a victim, and I know domestic violence is not just for females, but it's for males also. Mm-hmm. If I'm a victim, you know, what are some of the things that you could tell me that I need to do to come out of that situation?
Mm-hmm. That's one of the one of my personal ministries. And I work with the faith community and provide domestic violence workshops for the churches, the synagogues, the temples, the mosque, because domestic violence does not recognize race or culture or denomination. It's everywhere. And so what we do with that ministry is set up what I call advocacy programs so that the churches will know how to be there for victims that are a part of their faith community.
Let me ask this question because it's all in the news about the football player that whooped his son, and he said with a tree branch. Now I know my mother used to tell me, "Go get me a switch."
A switch.
That's right. You know, so I think a lot of times they kind of escalated, say, a tree branch, because you look at a branch as opposed to a switch. You know, the Bible tells us, "Spare the rod, you spoil the child." So, at what point do you see it going into abuse and domestic violence?
One of the things that makes the difference is I can remember my mom always saying to me that, "Well, this is going to hurt me worse than it's going to hurt you." I didn't believe it, but that's what she would say. But there was never that anger. I think that when you punish your child out of anger, then that sort of tips the scale toward abuse.
Okay.
I want to go back to your 75th anniversary. What date is that now?
That's going to be November 8th, 12 noon, and we are inviting the community.
And I understand you have a very special guest coming in.
Yes, we have our international Ministers' Wives and Ministers' Widows president. She's our international. There are approximately over 52,000 ministers' wives that are a part of nationwide, a part of this organization. Dr. Beverly Glover will be here.
Madam President, before we run out of time, let me ask you just personally, do you think the church is as relevant today as it was in the 60s? You know, you got the 60s, you got the movement and whatnot. And our show is really designed as the new civil rights movement, where they march and we're on the TV sharing the issues. But do you think the church is as relevant today as it was in the 60s?
I personally believe that the church will never lose its relevance because of the foundation that it's built on. I do think that we may not be as visible as we were in the 60s. I grew up in Detroit and we protested everything. There was marches every week, but I don't think the church will ever lose her relevance because she's built on a solid and a perfect foundation.
Thank you for coming on the show, and looking forward to that event with the Ministers' Wives. Stay right there. We'll be right back on Pulse of the City with another guest in our community. Welcome back to Pulse of the City, shown exclusively on Bounce 23 TV. Here again we have another guest, well known in the community, from the OSU. Dr. Wilkerson, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm an associate professor in the Department of Human Sciences, and I work directly in the community on issues of violence and poverty, and really working directly to translate research to practice in partnership to be able to have an impact, have a lasting impact. And at OSU, I teach classes on adolescent development and research methods, and really try to get students involved in the life of the community off campus, and seeing how they can contribute and how other parts of OSU can contribute to solving real world problems in the community.
Tell us about your involvement with Ministries for Movement.
Ministries for Movement is a partnership of Family Missionary Baptist Church, most importantly the community members, Men for the Movement, my team at OSU, National Center for Urban Solutions, and the Academy of Urban Scholars. And Ministry for Movement has been actively working on the south side of Columbus for more than 5 years, and I joined the movement about 4 years ago. And really we work on all aspects of creating opportunity for young people, for older people, for families, to change the community from maybe a perception of negative to really understanding how much positive there is there.
What are the four greatest challenges you see in the communities that you've been in the Columbus area? I know you came from the Chicago area and worked there a long time. And what have you found the similarities or differences? What are the four things you think that affects the inner city community now?
Well, I've actually worked in about 15 different cities, and the similarities are remarkable across cities in the underlying problems of poverty, of structural racism, and of the impact of violence generation after generation, as well as inequality. Those are just the major challenges in every single city I've worked in. And understanding those from the grassroots level and understanding what real folk are feeling and experiencing to help create opportunities for finding hope. And that's part of what the Ministries for Movement does. And it's, in my view, our greatest challenge is when young people don't feel hope, when older people in a community don't feel hope and people feel disconnected. And so trying to fill those deficits, if you will, but recognizing that it's up to the community to make a difference.
Dr. Wilkins, you said something about racism and of a systematic nature. How do we combat that? Now, I understand that you brought your class to the South Side, and you conducted a class. Could you share with us, what was your vision in doing that? Because I see what you did. But could you share with the viewing audience your vision for bringing the class from the OSU campus to the community?
Well, I think for us to move forward as human beings, we need to break down the barriers of race and class and gender and all of these stereotypes that keep us from understanding. I brought my class of 20 OSU students into the community because I see so many great things going on in the community, but I don't see the next generation of people who were, I was a student of the Civil Rights Movement. My professors that got me excited about doing this work had me out in the community and learning side by side, that experiential learning. If you never leave OSU's campus, you do not understand what's going on with people. So those things that you hear in the news, that will shape your mind. Bringing the students out to the community and bringing the community into the university has been a hallmark of what I think is the most important thing.
Did you see any changes in the class once they came back to the classroom setting? Any difference of opinions, difference of ideas?
Absolutely. I mean, their writing, their thinking, their empowerment to go on to do something. And I think the students that signed up for this class were already somewhat community oriented, but through this experience, most of them had never experienced poverty. So in thinking about what real life experiences are like, they were transformed, and it was really powerful.
There's a lot of organizations out there. There's Ministries for Movement, but there's other organizations out there, and they're getting funded and really not being effective. What do you think what do you think the city? What should we do to organizations that's out there getting funded and are not being productive, as opposed to Ministries for Movement that's out there being effective?
Well, I think one of the things, we don't know if they're being effective. We need to be evaluating what we're doing, and we need to have accountability. So if, an agency is being funded to provide a certain type of service, and what outcomes are they producing? And so, I don't want to say that we know that agencies aren't being effective, but in Ministries for Movement, we have very limited funding dollars that are coming in, and it's not consistent. But what we have is people in the community who know what needs to be done, are willing to volunteer their time to get it done, and in reality, that's sustainable. We need community people to be taking charge of this, and yes, we need funding and we need resources, and we could have a much bigger staff and all of those kinds of things. But it's that commitment, that passion, and the knowledge that we're getting by working together and by learning from each other that's important.
In a short sense, could you tell us, you're an expert on gun violence. How can we fix gun violence?
Well, gun violence is a very complex issue, and what I've spent a lot of time trying to understand is what young men of color are thinking in a moment when they're armed and angry. And what I've learned from that is that if they're completely disconnected from the community, they don't feel like they're part of a community, they're much more likely to escalate from just being angry to doing something extreme. And we can interrupt that process, and we have strategies that work.
Thank you. We'll be right back on Pulse of the City. Welcome back to Pulse of the City, shown exclusively on Bounce 23 TV. Our community activist is a part of our Ministries for Movement. And right here today, we have a young lady who put together this theme, to complain is be ready to help change. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Courtney Alexander, and I am originally from Dayton, Ohio. Now I live in the south side of Columbus on Oakwood and Whittier as a community activist.
What are some of the challenges, Courtney, that you see on the south side, the community that you live in?
Some of the challenges I see are some of the young men standing on a corner, having a lot of idle time. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but just not really proactive or productive. So I just believe that they may need to be working or doing something more active in the community. And then another challenge I might see are some of the young ladies may be a little bit aggressive, so kind of having more of support and relationship in the community.
Do you think that there's adequate resources in the community for these young men, or you said these young men that are sitting idle, and we understand that an idle mind is always the devil's workshop.
Mm-hmm.
If you give people too much time, they're gonna find something
Right.
to do. Do you think there's adequate resources in the community to funnel these young men to doing something positive?
I don't believe there aren't enough resources, because if that was the case, we will all talk about them or we will refer them to those things. So I believe that if there are any resources out there, just to bring them more inside the community. So it's not being talked about, let's make change. Let's not talk about complaining or what it looks like. Let's get in there, dig up the roots, and become the change that they need to see.
What really got you involved with the Ministers of the Movement?
I got involved because I live in the area. I'm there, I see it every day. My grandmother's 91, she used to clean up the streets every day, so I was an example and started to do that in my neighborhood. So I cleaned up my neighborhood, and then my neighbors came out, and then we became more of a community in cleaning up and helping out each other, speaking to one another, being nice. I play gospel music outside, and I don't care if it gets on their nerves, I just do it to kind of bring a positive energy back to the community.
Exodus chapter 20, verse number 12 says, honor your father and your mother, that your days will be long upon the land which the Lord God giveth thee. Do you think that plays a part into much of the homicide and suicide that we see among young people today?
I do believe it plays a part, because a lot of the parents in the generation of today, I don't see out. I don't see families really together, and I believe that it may be hard for our generation to come and respect the parents or other things like that because of drug addictions or other things that may come into play or be an effect to seeing what a real family should look like.
Do you think that, like Isaiah chapter 5, verse number 13 says, my people are gone into captivity because they have no knowledge, and their honorable men are famished. Do you think it's a challenge honoring a parent or someone that's not living honorable?
I do believe it's a challenge, because there is the respect, when you lose that respect level for the parent, or not really seeing having a negative impact within the home all the time is not really something conducive to you and your spirit and who you are, and that's really helping you grow. So if you don't see that growth, then it's going to be a little bit more difficult, and that's a part of the movement for the tribe, where it talks about the green for resources, the red for relationship, the yellow for reviving, the white and the red for redemption. When you have all those outer things come together as one, then it'll be a little bit more easier for you to really understand.
We want to encourage you to keep up the good work on the South Side there and
Thank
keep your
you.
activities active.
You got anything else you want to share?
One of the quotes that I like is by Henry Kissinger. It states that destiny will always use extraordinary vehicles to accomplish its design. So from that point, it means you have to be the extraordinary person to accomplish the design that is needed for the vision of the neighborhood or the community.
So you're saying that to everyone that's out there, you could be the extraordinary person to accomplish that design to change your neighborhood. Thank you for tuning in to Bounce 23 TV, Pulse of the City. See you next time.